ladies and gents of the media and the press. Welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister second press briefing in this month. We consider this to be an essential part of our democracy and our continued conversation and dialogue with the Bahamian people. Yesterday, the Prime Minister outlined a series of efforts and steps to steer the country's finances in a new direction. Today, we are joined by the Minister of Economic Affairs, Minister Alcides, along with anticipated the arrival of the Financial Secretary, Mr. Simon Wilson, as well as Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Wade Watson. We also expect to be joined by the Minister of Health and Wellness, who's currently having a conflict with a schedule, being a part of an interview with another news entity. And then we'll expect to see a series of announcements from the Press Secretary himself, Mr. Clint Watson. So I will now hand it over to Mr. Watson, who will bring announcements from the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Latre, Director of Communications here. Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to our second briefing. We've made it through the first one, eh? So we're now ready for our second one. Thank you all for joining us here at the Office of the Prime Minister. And it's been an exciting week for us since we last spoke, and so we're happy to talk to you about where we're at, some of the pronouncements that we want to make this morning, and as well as take your questions and be able to provide answers for you and the Bahamian people on our, I think what appears to be our 6th week in office. We are certainly doing it. We're not tired. We're just getting started. And we're happy to be able to work on behalf of the Bahamian people and to provide solutions to long-standing issues and, of course, provide solutions to the low-hanging fruit that have been there and we've been picking them. Our baskets are full. And so we're excited about that. A couple of announcements I want to give to you, and updates I want to give to you on behalf of the Prime Minister so we know where we're at. Obviously, you know, this is a big week next week coming up, COP26. The conference in Glasgow, Scotland. We are excited. Our team is ready to go and to be mobilized. Some of the team members move out today. We're excited about what this conference is going to do for the Bahamas, hopefully, and indeed the entire world. The biggest global event since the pandemic is how it's being dubbed. It kicks off next week, and of course, the Bahamas will have a seat at the table. As you know, COP26 Climate Change Summit has been the subject of international media stations. If you've been watching the international media, you see them talking about it on all of the major networks. And the countdown is drawing closer. It begins on Monday. Prime Minister Davis has been preparing for his World Summit address. He will be addressing the World Summit there, as well as preparing for a number of bilateral meetings with nations or groupings that we believe are significant in helping to address our challenges and our plans. The United States has requested a one-on-one meeting with the Prime Minister, so we look forward to that as well. So has Small Island Developing States organizations. IOSIS is also, that's Earth Observing System, Data and Information System. They want a meeting with us. United Arab Emirates wants a meeting with us. Commonwealth Secretariat, we're looking forward to meeting with them. Norway, Canada, Green Climate Fund all have set up bilaterals with us. So you can imagine it's going to be a very busy time for our team as we talk to some of the movers and shakers and world players in climate change, hopefully to make sure that Bahamas not only have a seat at the table and our voices are heard, but indeed we're able to take action. I'll say it again, we're able to take action when it comes to climate change and not just talk. So as you can see, the delegation and the Prime Minister will be quite busy in Scotland. Now, aside from these bilaterals and actual businesses of COP26, I want to also take the time to thank local media for not only covering the stories leading up to Scotland and linking the World Summit to really the importance of it here in the Bahamas, but also taking it a step further. Understanding that the issues that are going to be discussed are crucial to the Bahamian people, and so many of the media houses will be joining us in Scotland, namely Our News. They've already left. They're actually in Scotland already. Eyewitness News is leaving this weekend, and ZNS News is also traveling this weekend. So we're happy that media understand the importance of this and have decided that this is something they want to be a part of and will be present at COP26. And so the Bahamas will be able to know exactly what's happening during these meetings, real time, and of course, each evening on the evening news, thanks to our partners in media who are making this journey. We encourage you to stay tuned to what's happening in Scotland next week. It's going to be important, not only to your future, but to your children's future. It's going to be exceptionally important that you take note of it. Hurricane Dorian is no doubt on the minds of most countries attending. And you know what that means? That the Bahamas has an opportunity to be featured prominently in discussions at this global summit. And we intend to take full advantage of that. People talk about Dorian, when you talk about climate change all over the world, they're talking about Hurricane Dorian. And no one has the story of Dorian unlike the Bahamas. We were the ones impacted. We were the ones where Dorian developed and played out. And so no doubt people want to hear from us. And we'll be ready to talk to them. We'll be ready to discuss with them, but we'll also be ready to access critical funds that we need and opportunities that we need to advance our country and to mitigate against climate change. So that's climate change. I wanted you to keep abreast of that because that's happening next week, and we are excited about the potential opportunities for that. Also this week, Prime Minister had an opportunity to have a call with the Colombian President, Ivan Marquez, on Monday. The Colombian President called the Prime Minister to congratulate him on his win and also to talk about seeking support in re-engaging the Bahamas and strengthening the relationship with Colombia. The Colombian Prime Minister believes there are mutual interests that our two nations share, particularly an increase in Colombian investments here in the Bahamas, and he wants to enhance those opportunities that can be presented for Bahamians in these Colombian investments. The Prime Minister also took the opportunity to invite him to our 50th anniversary celebrations of independence, which, as you know, will be coming in a few years. And so we're looking forward. Prime Minister is taking advantage of being, when he talks to world leaders, to invite them to come to the place of paradise, sunshine, right, the Bahamas. So you can expect, hopefully, that during the 50th anniversaries, we're going to see some world leaders and faces here to celebrate with the Bahamas on such a milestone that as a nation that we're achieving our 50th. The Colombian president is also interested in continuing talks at COP26 in Scotland. So he and the Prime Minister are expected to talk again, if only informally, while at COP26. Of course, Prime Minister Davis, following a dynamic speech at the United Nations General Assembly. If you're wondering why he's talking to so many world leaders, his impact in that speech, it was really felt in the UN. And so you found that a lot of the UN leaders are now reaching out to Prime Minister Davis after having made such an impactful presentation at the United Nations General Assembly this past September, days after assuming office as Prime Minister. And so we're happy to see that now we're seeing the results of just how outstanding that presentation was. World leaders are calling and wanting to engage Prime Minister Davis, and we're excited about the opportunities that present. The Bahamas is having a good picture on the world stage. We're engaging with world leaders and letting them know that we are here. We are open for business, and we want to engage in talks and in mutual agreements. And we're happy of the image that the Prime Minister, led by his cabinet, is giving on the international circuit for the Bahamas. You ought to be very proud of that. Also this week, the Prime Minister engaged the Americans in a courtesy call. Prime Minister Davis met with them this week, a special courtesy call, which was led by Charge d'Affaires Usha Pitts. That courtesy call was here at the Prime Minister's office, also took the congratulatory tone, congratulating him on his win. The issue of obviously free engagement, an important item on the agenda between the two nations. There are a number of initiatives that the Americans would like to collaborate on. They also gave the Prime Minister a special invitation to a forum being hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden in December, which will be held virtually. The Summit for Democracy is what it's called. It will take place December 9th through the 10th. President Biden intends for the summit to provide an opportunity for world leaders to listen and learn and share how governments and non-governmental actors can strengthen their commitment to democratic principles and practices. Three areas are the focus of this summit: strengthening and defending against authoritarianism, addressing and fighting corruption, and advancing respect for human rights. And so we're excited to be able to participate in that forum at the request and invitation of President Biden. On the local front, many of you have been calling and asking about it. You may have been aware of a fire in the Prime Minister's constituency in Cat Island 2 days ago. And just to give you an update on that, the Prime Minister will have officials on the ground over the next few days to assess the damage caused by the fire at the regatta site, New Bight. Now, you may wonder, why is that significant? Well, 5 stalls were destroyed. Now, here what's important, because I know you say regatta site, no regattas are happening. Well, this site is significant as 1 or 2 are open daily even on weekends, to service the public. This translates into several families who have lost their income. We're awaiting a report from police as to what led to the fire. It's important for you to understand that the Member of Parliament, who is the Prime Minister, has been working with the District Council, the Red Cross, and Northern Command to get water bowsers on the island. It's the term that is used. One is already in the north at the police station, and one is in the south. It's important to also know that this type of equipment is actually the equipment of choice on family islands nowadays. These equipment can be used, can use fresh or salt water to be able to use it. And it's also based on the type of fire, the agent can still be used in the apparatus, whether it's oil fire, whatever it is, they can use the agent that's specified. The fire can fit in this apparatus as well. For those of you wondering, fire engines cost a lot of money, as you can imagine, and must be maintained in a firehouse, which for many small islands is not efficient. Initially, when the fire broke out, one of the families affected brought their water truck, who have a similar apparatus, on site and was used to extinguish the fire. So in other words, there are private citizens with the same apparatus. And so we're waiting on the police report on that. But to the people of Cat Island to know that Prime Minister is aware of it. He has dispatched teams from the various agencies to be on the ground and just provide whatever assistance they can, not only to the families affected, but also to the matter and to the situation. And I want to give you an update on COVID-19 fight, but I think I'm going to leave that until the Minister of Health and Wellness gets here, because I want to preface his comments with some updates for you, so you would know what's happening in that regard. I'm going to stop there. We also have some other announcements to give you. I'll give you later in the press conference. I know some of you are waiting to hear about some of the board appointments. We'll give you some information on that right now. But of course, I want to bring to the podium now to talk with you the Minister of Economic Affairs. He is here as well with his financial team. The Parliamentary Secretary, Wade Watson, is here, as well as the Financial Secretary, Simon Wilson, is also here. But I'm going to invite the Minister to come and just bring some remarks following up on the major announcement made by Prime Minister yesterday, some great benefits for the Bahamian people, as you know. We want to talk more about that and how that's going to impact you and benefit you, and also to give you more clarity on the announcement regarding VAT that's going to benefit Bahamians across the board, particularly those who are less fortunate. They will have an opportunity to benefit from this. And so we want you to listen closely to the explanation so you understand what is happening, and that the Davis administration, at the end of the day, is going to be the defender of not just the poor, but the people of the Bahamas, to ensure that whatever decisions are made in the best interest of the Bahamian people. So I'm going to invite Minister to come now, and once he's finished with his brief remarks, we'll take questions on this particular issue. The Financial Secretary is also here to assist with any information you have on that, and then we'll move on to another topic. Minister Alcides.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Watson, for having me here this morning, and thank you, members of the press, for coming out. As Mr. Watson said, the Prime Minister presented the supplementary budget to the House of Assembly yesterday. The debate on that supplementary budget is expected to begin on Monday and last for perhaps a week or so, and then passed. The purpose of the supplementary budget was to reflect the new administration's priorities and to reallocate resources according to the new ministries and to begin to provide for previously unbudgeted commitments. For example, we have a new Ministry of Economic Affairs that was not, of course, reflected in the pre-election budget, and so that ministry had to be reflected in the budget, and as well, some ministries had different allocations. So, for example, the Ministry of Tourism, Investments and Aviation are now together, and they had to be reflected, the allocations had to be properly reflected in the budget. I'll give you a quick summary of what was reflected in the budget, and as I said, the debate where more light would be shed and more detail will be gone into next week. Recurrent expenditure is expected to increase by $53 million, which is comprised of an increase of $31 million in social assistance. Most notably, this reflects the 3-month extension of the unemployment program until December 2021, and $19 million for public service pensions and gratuities, which reflect the planned increases that were mentioned by the Prime Minister. in pensions, and as well bringing the budget in line with what is actually owed to public servants. Capital expenditure is expected to be down by $54 million, which reflects what we expect to be actually able to spend during the budget period. As you know, when you're undergoing capital works, there's a period of planning and then execution, which can go on to multiple budget periods. And so we've made some adjustments to reflect what we actually expect to be able to spend in this budget period. For the remainder of the budget year, we are forecasting an increase in revenue of $92 million over what was estimated in the pre-election budget. This is based on strong indications that we're getting from the tourism industry, in particular healthy bookings from the hotel sector for the upcoming winter season, increase in direct airlift from the United States, Canada, and the UK for the upcoming winter season, and as we see benefits continue to accrue with the loosening up of COVID restrictions as businesses are able to operate for longer hours, open on Sunday, etc. In terms of the forecasted deficit, the pre-election budget forecasted a deficit of $951.8 million. We are revising that forecast to $858.6. And so the key is we are forecasting a decrease in the deficit, and therefore we do not expect to have to increase borrowing over and above what was approved in the budget of this year. In fact, we are expecting that we will have to borrow less. And so we are clearly not out of the woods because we're still forecasting a deficit of $858 million, but indications are that the economic picture is beginning to brighten. Some other highlights of the budget presentation are the planned increases in pensions for retired public servants on a sliding scale, with the highest increase going to those who are currently receiving the lowest pensions. Another highlight is the one-time $500 to be paid in December to those receiving benefits under the unemployment program. The lowering of the VAT from 12% to 10%. We are currently contemplating January 1st, 2022 as the effective date, and that is to give businesses and others time to make the necessary adjustments to the new rate. Much of the discussion has been on the elimination of the zero rating, particularly on breadbasket items and its potential effect on the poor. In response, and we will have some time for questions on this matter. Firstly, I would just like to say that we are reducing VAT from 12% to 10% on everything, and so that we believe that the savings that the consumer will get on all the other items other than the VAT-free items will more than make up for any additional costs related to VAT being put on those items. And of course, the Prime Minister mentioned the role of price control in his presentation in ensuring that consumers are not unduly exploited. I want to say that our advice has always been from the implementation of VAT, and it is universally accepted as a best practice that the most efficient and the best system of VAT is to maintain a single rate with minimal exemptions, and if assistance is required to the unemployed, the poor, low-income earners, that you give that assistance with direct cash transfers. This makes the system easier to administer, and you get the people who really need the assistance can get it. It also reduces the possibility of leakage through fraud and manipulation. We believe that what we are doing is putting in place a better, more efficient system that will improve our public finances, our revenue, and enable us, as we go on, to give even more assistance to those that need it. I'll stop there, and I'll be available for any questions that anybody has on this topic, or any other finance matter that I can, or economic affairs matter that I can assist. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
The Prime Minister said yesterday that the previous administration failed to account for some $1 billion in their pre-election report. Is it the view of this administration that your predecessors directed the technocrats not to include information that should have been in the report, or was this a good faith exclusion of information based on what the technocrats believes the Fiscal Responsibility Act required?
You're asking for my opinion. Let me say this. Let me answer in this way. I don't want to impute any motives to anybody, to any previous administration or to any public servant. I'll say this, that from time immemorial, when we have new administrations come to power, we get this the saying that, this is what you left, or this is what you tell people what you made, or unpaid bills, the whole thing. And so what we decided to do, remember when the previous administration came to power in 2017, they made some statements about unpaid bills. I think they even classified them as PLP bills, right? So what we wanted to do this time was to ensure that we get a proper understanding of the true state of the public finances. We actually committed in our election platform to undertake a status report, so to speak. And so we engaged an independent accounting firm to give us a picture, to let us know what it is that the government owes, what are the obligations of the incoming administration. And they have produced a report, and I think we get the final report in a number of days, and I think, I'm not sure if there was a commitment made to lay it, but it will show that, there was a pre-election report laid, I think that indicated about $108 million. And what the report shows that there are significant other obligations that the government will have, that the government is facing within this budget period. As to whether it was the public servants were deliberately directed to withhold something, I can't speak to that. As to whether there was a good faith effort to present the facts as they are, I think if you look at the history of the report, the current Deputy Prime Minister, then a shadow spokesman on finance, called out, if I were to use those words, the previous administration for not preparing the report. And then the report was done a few days later. I think a report was prepared and presented. So I can't speak to whether it was a rush job or whether there was an effort to paint a rosy picture. What I know is that we wanted to be able to say, here is the true picture. We engaged an independent firm to do it so that there is no suggestion that we are sort of trying to paint a less rosy picture than it really is. And that is what they did. So I don't want to speak to motives. I just want to say what happened. Having said that, government is continuous. And so these are not F&M bills, and they're not PLP bills. They're commitments of the government of the Bahamas. And so we have to now honor them, honor those that are, that need to be honored. If we have to speak to the people that we owe money to be able to come to some agreement on how we settle the obligations, then we'll do that. But so we have a picture of where we are, and then as we move forward, we'll seek to liquidate those.
As it relates to the breadbasket items, the Prime Minister said that they're going to be monitoring the prices to make sure that they're not increased tremendously. But is there any efforts to maybe regulate other items or add other items to that list? Because consumers are still concerned that items that are not on that list are going to end up getting more expensive to accumulate the cost that's going to come off of the breadbasket items.
I know there was some discussion in the past about because the items that are on the list are not the healthiest items, or actually, some people might say unhealthy items. There was some discussion about changing the list to do things like fresh fruit and more healthy items. I don't think that has progressed much. I think the question is, do you put more items on price control? Then you get into how to tell businesses how to price. I think the whole idea of price control was to protect the most vulnerable by having government have a role in how those items are priced. When you get to other items, then it comes down to choice and perhaps competition. So at this stage, to answer your question, there's no discussion on expanding the list of things that come under price control, no.
Have you spoken with stakeholders? Sorry, still dealing with VAT. Have you spoken with stakeholders to see exactly what should actually kind of be on these lists and things like that, because they have been saying that some items are going to go up, and then also just, now they have to revamp their whole system to account for this less than, 3-4 years since it was implemented.
Well, the system is in. People who are registered, they have their system. It's a matter of changing for those who, for example, don't deal with exempt items. It's just a matter of changing from 12 to 10. It's not, as I said, we want to implement, I think we wanted to have a minimum of 30 days. Today is October 28th. The signal is out. People know what's going to happen. We're indicating that we want this to come in on January 1st, 2022. So there is time. It's not, I don't want to trivialize it, but it's not, in terms of reinventing the wheel. These things can be done. Right? In terms, I think you're speaking about adjusting point of sale systems and people adjusting their accounting systems, the businesses. So they can be done. We think there's adequate time to do it.
Regarding the breadbasket items, does the government plan to step up enforcement efforts?
We plan to, and I think the Prime Minister mentioned that, we plan to step up enforcement efforts. And let me say this. This is a sensitive topic. We grappled with this when we first implemented VAT. We grappled with it now. But we believe, as I said, all the studies will tell you, if you follow up the research, any studies that are done, have one rate, preferably a low rate, minimum exemptions. It's easier to administer. It reduces the possibility of leakage. You collect your revenue. It's a revenue administration is much better. You get more revenue to enable you to do other things. And so it's not something that is taken lightly, and so I've seen some of the response. It's not a decision that's taken lightly, but we believe it's the right decision. Having said that, overall, you are reducing the rate from 12 to 10. So everything else, every other thing else that you spend money on, instead of paying 12% VAT, you're now paying 10. So that's a reduction. The Department of Statistics, they do a study called the Household Expenditure Survey, and they say the people at the lowest income level spend about 25% of their income or their spending is spent on food. So 75% goes on something else. So the 75% that goes on something else that's valuable, they're going down from 12 to 10. From the items that were on the bread baskets and were other zero rated, now there'll be a 10% VAT. But what we're saying is, we understand it's an emotional issue. Now we know that it gets to be a very hot political issue, but our job is to do what we think it's in the best interest of the country, and we think that this decision is, and we will be seeking to explain it more as we go along and ask the Bahamian public to give us an opportunity to let this work, and they'll see the benefits of it. But yes, more enforcement as well. I don't know who's first. How are we doing this? Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ladies first.
Now, we know it was projected that the reduction will last for possibly a year. Now, the question has been proposed beyond that year. Will we go back to our 12% or will we go higher? Because many persons are concerned, how will the country...
When the matter was first raised, which was in the Progressive Liberal Party's economic plan, I think it might have been 9 months or so before the election, March. So about 6 months before the election, we said we'll do it for a year. I think when we put it in the blueprint, we said we'll do it from 12 to 10. Originally, what our thinking was that you'd put it in and you'll see how it works. We believe that you can reduce it if you concentrate, and we've already started our efforts in terms of, you've heard us speak about the Revenue Enhancement Unit, and bringing in that unit to make sure that other taxes that are owed to the government, we can collect them. We've already begun that work. We feel fairly optimistic, well, I should say very optimistic, but you always want to be cautious when you're dealing with COVID. We feel optimistic about the economy. We see a good demand. We see some activity due to the opening up. And so we believe that we can exist with a 10, with a growing economy, improved revenue administration. All right? So I think our idea is that we should be able to exist with 10 going forward.
Can you say exactly what the revenue is going to be? Because I know that for prior, it was projected that you would be able to take in approximately 200 million, even with the 10%. Is that still the projection?
You mean we have the revenue projection. I don't have the number right here in front. It's in the summary, showing from now what we expect to collect at the beginning, at the up until the end of the budget year, which is, and then it's not solely the 92 plus is not exclusively because of the VAT, but the number is in there. But we have done some. I don't have the exact figures here in front of me to say, okay, you want to know how much in VAT we will collect up until it's in the book. Sorry. I don't have it right in front of me, the figure.
What I can ask is, based on the projections, there is an increase projected in value-added tax revenues for the next 2 fiscal periods.
Yes.
Including the one in which they reduce that
Right.
12 to 10%. Is that attributed, if you're reducing a tax, how can you still collect?
It's not, yeah, it happens. Because you would hear, for example, in the US, you'll hear the president say, okay, he's doing a stimulus by reducing taxes. It's not a simple, what we call a linear relationship. And I know sometimes it might be hard to fathom. It's almost, I would equate it to if you lower your price and then you make it up on the volume, if I were to use a retail example. People are spending more. So you reduce it to 10%, people have more money, they might spend it on something else, or they might actually be able to save some money and invest it and do something else. So the idea is to, by loosening it up, you are actually stimulating business. And we are also doing the revenue enhancement unit. We had an entire unit doing audits, doing investigations, making sure that those who owe are paying, those who aren't able to pay the whole thing, make sure there's payment plans in place. So it's not strictly you drop the VAT and we expect it. Yes, that's an element of it, but we also are doing revenue enhancement, and the economy is opening up. We've extended the curfew. Hopefully we can see an end of the curfew soon. I'm not forecasting, but we've extended, and those additional hours are very important, for example, for, let's say, restaurants who can remain open a little longer, which means workers can remain at work and add more hours during the week. And so that has given rise to some more activity as well. And so activity that's going on, later hours, that's generating revenue.
I'll take one more question on this.
Chester didn't get his, and this lady.
I want to go back to the 1 billion quickly, just to ask and for clarification on it.
And there is a report. So I'm thinking, I don't want to forecast anything that will be laid, but I've seen the draft report.
There wasn't much change to the budget when you think about 1 billion. There wasn't much change to the supplementary budget. So, and some of the things included, I think he mentioned the rate reduction bond, which may never happen anyway, which is half of the 1 billion.
But what happens is this. What happens is we're supposed to, there's a loan related to the rate reduction bond that comes due very soon. I think it's January. All right? Because of, when you have a loan or any debt obligation with less than 1 year in maturity, it becomes what they call a current liability, right? Meaning it's due. So we have to find a way to deal with it. Either the rate reduction bond is supposed to retire the loan. So we have to find a way to deal with the loan that's coming due. And so that becomes a current obligation of the government. Either you have to go out and refinance it, or you have to find the money to pay the people back their money.
Is that reflected in the budget?
It is, yeah.
I was just going to tax, if you only maintain the 10% tax for a year, and you have to go back to 12% next year, will you also go back to zero rating the items? that
We
were
don't
used?
expect that we have to go back to 12% next year. I think we have taken it out of our plan, and in our plan it says 10. We're prepared to go ahead with 10%.
And has consulting been done on that 10%? Was there expert advice gotten?
We've done a model. We've actually done an economic model. I think the Prime Minister has undertaken to table it in the House of Assembly, where we've asked some experts to do some scenario analysis. What will happen if this happens, X, Y, Z happens, and they give us a report. So we have that.
So will the BPL rate reduction bond still move forward, given the Prime Minister's assertion that the 20% electricity
I think you can take from his comments that that's dead in the water, to use a colloquialism.
Will that be placed back on medicine, medical procedures, and medical insurance?
We are taking out all of the, and again, it's a long conversation because I know what the suggestion is, or what's, not to impute it to you, but people would be concerned about, will these things go up? And particularly when you deal with insurance, and then when it's time to claim, it's better to have no exemptions, and anybody who needs the direct assistance, you give it to them. So I think we're getting rid of all of the zero ratings and exemptions, except for some selected ones for education and electricity. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. That's my mask.
For giving us clarity on that. Hopefully that gives you some perspective. Remember, I think it's important to understand that when VAT was first introduced under the former Progressive Liberal Party administration, they spoke then with the New Zealand country. New Zealand has been noted as implementing VAT best around the world. And one of the things that they said is to ensure that when you implement VAT, you don't begin messing with it and making it zero on certain items and this items. The former administration did that. There were a lot of changes made, a lot of zeroed items, and so that defeats the purpose of the VAT tax, which is a consumer tax. And you found in the studies that at the end of the day, the poor people still weren't benefiting from it, or less fortunate were still not benefiting from having the zero out taxed. At the end of the day, you're still paying more. And so this, we believe, as an administration, will put things back in line and will bring savings to the Bahamian people. It is important to understand that while we are doing this, we are also improving the RISE program, which is social assistance and money in the hand of people that need it to be able to cover additional costs that they may face. So it's not on one end doing this and on the other end leaving people vulnerable. We are providing and putting cash in hand to people who need the assistance. So at the end of the day, while they're enjoying all of the benefits of having a reduced VAT, where there is VAT on an item that they would have been purchasing, they have additional cash on their card that will make up the shortfall. So at the end of the day, you will find that the study will show that the most vulnerable are not disadvantaged. They're actually benefiting from the reduction across the board. That's important to remember when we're doing this, is that we're thinking about those who are less fortunate and ensuring that they benefit. I think you would have heard the example already. A lot of people who've been benefiting from the zeroed items are the larger companies, the restaurants, people who have been taking advantage of having VAT-free on certain items like bread and buns and all of these other things. They've been benefiting while the smaller man has not been benefiting. And so it's to make sure that we collect the amount of revenue the Bahamas should collect, but also to protect those who are less fortunate and have less to spend, and find a way to give them savings, but also give them money that they're able to balance out any kind of increase that they've experienced. So thank you again, Minister Alcides, for providing assistance with that. I want to go on and talk about another big issue that we are fighting and that we are winning. I'll say it again, another fight that we are in, but we are winning. And that, of course, is the fight on COVID. COVID-19, since the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Michael Darville, has taken up office, he has not been on the ground running, he's been on the ground leaping. And running implies that he's moving fast. Leaping refers to the fact that he's making changes, an impact. and we're seeing the results. You would have heard that we are now on the decline with COVID cases in the country, and that's not just happening by chance or by some abnormal wave. That's happening because of direct results to the problem and addressing the issue. We now have more people in this country who are vaccinated, and the numbers are continuing. And regardless of whether the vaccinations are going up because people are looking forward to Black Friday or not, doesn't matter. The bottom line is people are going to get the shot. People are now protecting themselves. People are wearing the right kind of mask and wearing it appropriately because they now have access to the right kinds of masks. They're now testing to know their status because we have now implemented free testing, and it's begun on the Family Islands, and we are seeing the result. It is actually working. So I'm going to invite Dr. Michael Darville to come and just give you an update, and you can ask questions regarding our fight against COVID-19 and how we are actually winning this fight. Dr. Michael Darville.
Thank you so much, Clint, and sorry for being late. I was at another engagement and came as quick as I can. Yesterday in the House of Assembly, I had an opportunity to speak to some of the challenges we face with COVID-19 and to begin to foreshadow some of the ways we at the Ministry of Health, the PHA, NHI, and all health services intend to deal with this battle. I clearly indicated that one of the challenges we have is the fact that the communication arm in the ministries were not up to par to be able to get our message out as effectively as we would like to. And so we have developed a communication task force where we have now amalgamated all of the resources at the Ministry of Health in order for us to be able to get our message out and for the Bahamian people to understand where we are and where we are going. What you will see in the next few weeks is our ministry speaking specifically about the necessary policy changes in order for us to begin to make effective changes. One of the things that I realized on coming to the ministry was that some of the essential resources necessary for us to be effective was gutted from the ministry. A part of the ministry's responsibility was brought to the Office of the Prime Minister and the former administration. And some of the healthcare professionals, particularly those who are leading the charge, there was a disconnect because some of the things that happened at OPM with the former administration as it relates to COVID-19 was not properly articulated to the other professionals at the Ministry of Health. And so when I got there, I realized some of the key resources that I needed in order for me to make these transitional changes were not present. And so it means that I presented my case to the Prime Minister and our cabinet colleagues and finding ways on how I would be able to get the resources I need in order for me to be more effective on the ground and to ensure that our healthcare professionals have the tools not only to fight COVID, but be able to provide quality healthcare services for the Bahamian people. I also reached out to PAHO, a good friend and advisor who is tied in with WHO, to guide me in a consultancy to determine what are the structural changes necessary at the ministry in order for us to be able to improve healthcare systems delivery throughout the country. And then I had to begin to travel because some of the information that is brought to my attention was not in real time. So it was my responsibility to start moving throughout the system to determine what is really happening today. And I'm pleased that I did it because I had the opportunity to speak specifically to healthcare professionals flung across our archipelago and to listen to their concerns. I'm so pleased that the Ministry of Finance is now moving with the supplementary budgetary allocation that will help me to get the necessary resources in order for me to start to put in place some of the key things that would improve the healthcare system's deliveries throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So that is a synopsis, and on Monday, we would be back in Parliament. I had an opportunity to inform the country of where we are with COVID. The cases are going down, which is a positive sign. Our vaccinations are going up. We believe through WHO, the target for countries around the world was 40% vaccination by the end of the year. We are close to 40 now, and I think that we would surpass that thanks to the efforts of our vaccination committee and all the professionals and volunteers who are part of that. We are also pleased to report that vaccinations are going extremely well in the Family Islands because the clinics are now responsible for the vaccination, supervised by our committee. And then we got our tranche of the 57,000 doses of Pfizer that is proving to be very beneficial on the ground, and Bahamians are coming because they understand that those who end up in hospital who are COVID positive are usually those who are unvaccinated. And the incidence of death is also higher in those who are unvaccinated. And I think that message is going out. We have a lot more work to do. And with our communication task force, we will begin now to get our message out fully throughout the country, the need to be vaccinated. And so that's a brief summary of where we are. I'll also like to report that our pilot free testing program that was initiated in Greater Inagua went extremely well. I also indicated yesterday that out of the 183 individuals who benefited from that, 3 were positive. And of the 3 that were positive, they were subsequently isolated and seemed to be from a cluster of a family. That's important, good news for us. And I also found out that those who were positive in Greater Inagua were those individuals who are unvaccinated. And so it goes right back to the same algorithm, the importance of vaccination in our fight against COVID-19. Thank you.
Questions?
Are you looking to have the private sector, private clinics and hospitals start to administer vaccines?
We are definitely looking at that. We have our public facilities in the Family Islands doing it now. We're tweaking it. When I spoke to the vaccination committee on coming to office, they tried. And because of the workload and the fact that these services are usually provided free of charge, the paperwork that follows, because when you vaccinate and when you test, it's important for you to report, because without reporting, you will not be able to follow up what's going on in the country. And so we are going to move to the next step where doctors, where other facilities have the ability to vaccines and to be able to vaccinate, particularly on the Family Islands where we know that the healthcare infrastructure is not at the level of New Providence, and people still need to be vaccinated. And so private physicians in the outskirt Family Islands should have access to vaccines to assist in vaccinating their patients.
You mentioned in the House yesterday that there's sort of like a revolving door in terms of nurses who are being trained. You said as fast as you can train them, they're heading abroad. Are you planning on putting a particular focus on recruiting and retaining nurses in the system to prevent such significant staff shortages?
Well, Bahamian nurses are in great demand, not only in the Bahamas, but around the world. And this is not a new phenomenon. It has just been accentuated because of COVID-19. They speak English well, they're well trained, and they have opportunities. And these opportunities that are presented to them are very real. They have opportunities for increased salary. They have other benefits. They have opportunities for their children, and in some instances, immigration opportunities. They have opportunities to greater training. And so even though I understand the migration, it is for us now to look at it for what it is. I know I'm going to get in trouble by saying this, but you know, a nurse that comes out of nursing school, the salary that the nurse gets today is very similar to what it was in the past when you look at the inflationary measures. And so it's something that we have to look at, how to pay our professionals effectively so that they can stay in the country, how to ensure that they have the necessary benefits so that when an offer is given to them from a foreign country, they can weigh the odds. And so today, I will be meeting with the Nurses Union, and we would have some tough discussions in terms of their increments, how we're going to provide a better environment for them to work in. You know when you're a professional. And what's amazing, you know, some of us who've had the opportunity to seek healthcare services in the United States, we meet sometimes our nurses on the ward in South Florida. And what's amazing about it, they fall right into the system in providing the top quality healthcare. And so the system needs to be changed, and the infrastructure is absolutely essential in order for the system to work. And so when we look at our crumbling infrastructure and the conditions some of our nurses and our healthcare professionals are working in, I mean, it's a no-brainer. If an opportunity comes, some people would move. But we are also pleading to our nurses to give us an opportunity to begin to make some changes and to stay in the system as we begin to build our country and take our healthcare infrastructure from where it is today to a modern healthcare infrastructure that all of us will be proud of. And this is the direction our administration is committed in going, and I'm convinced that our Prime Minister have the political will, and I've been working very closely with the Ministry of Finance, trying to find ways how I could get the resources to begin to make some necessary changes.
Yesterday, I know you noted about the protest in reference to the maternity ward. My question would be is, can you give us a timeline when the investigation into what's taking place at the maternity ward would take?
The investigation has already begun. I made that very clear in the press release that we released from the PHA, that we take this very seriously, because one of the things in healthcare that you cannot compromise, and that is to do the best you can for the patient that is in front of you. I've taken that Hippocratic oath, and I intend to do everything in my being to begin to resolve these kind of issues. We plan to meet with the families. I'm always a bit afraid to say this, but I spoke to our Prime Minister and asked for some or all of the ministers, women ministers in this particular administration, to join me as we speak to these individuals who are obviously traumatized and clearly articulating some serious allegations that anyone who is at the top must take seriously. And I want to let the public know that we are not taking this very lightly, and we're going to do the investigation, and I'm going to make the investigation public. And if some wrongdoing was done, it have to be exposed for what it is. But we have to ensure that individuals who use our public services are convinced that they would get the best quality care. And these kind of things are not good for our reputation at the PHA and the Ministry of Health. And I intend to nip it in the bud.
So what is the government's position on the mandatory vaccination policy for contractors at the Grand Bahama Shipyard?
Well, we made it very clear that vaccination is a voluntary process in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas at this time. And so there's many private sector groups who want to get ahead of the government. I say to them that they must fall within the parameters of the law. Now, we've seen this with many private sector groups, and because they want to ensure that their environment is safe, someone who is unvaccinated and untested can compromise their environment. And so it's a very difficult thing to do, because we must protect the right of the vaccinated person and we must protect the right of the unvaccinated person. And it's a juggling act. But as we stand today, it's very important to abide by the rule of law, which is clear that unvaccinated persons in our community have rights like the vaccinated. And this is why free testing is important, because most of the issues revolve around the resources and who is going to pay for that individual who are unvaccinated to access a private business, because most businesses feel that that burden should not be on them. And so we have a lot of work to do. I do not have all the answers on how it's going to be done, and so I'm looking at for legal advice, as well as to interact with the business community to find the common denominator, how we're going to do it. But with that being said, I'm pleased to report that Bahamians now are understanding the importance of vaccination. And you in the media, we know the challenges we face with anti-vax. We know how strong it is in some countries. We know the fake news, and we do have arguments on both sides of the fence. But we're going to need your help as we begin to launch an aggressive strategy to ensure that our Bahamian people get vaccinated so that our tourism sector can begin to grow. And so we can open more aspects of our business community and begin to get our economy moving. Because I understand the challenges we currently face in finding the resources to do all of these things if we lock the place down.
Follow-up just on the vaccination. Is there been any study or any consideration at all of having mandatory vaccinations for certain events as we approach the holiday season? Has there been any consideration for that? Like some US states have done with
Yes, we are now in Cabinet finalizing the two pieces of regulation under the current Health Management Act, which will guide us on how we put new rules in place, because we've made it very clear that on the 13th of November, the emergency orders would fall away and we would have to have legislation in place. Now, this has been brought up because there's some events that's coming to the country, sporting events, and we know from other parts of the world, they can create a bubble. And so our team is looking on ways on how we can create a similar environment for these type of events. It's not completed, and we want to ensure that we do not hinder our tourism sector and our economic growth, but we want to ensure that the safety of every Bahamian is paramount in the legislation that we'll bring forward.
Let's take one more, Rashad.
Yeah, there have been some reporting concerns related to the antigen test. The antigen test results don't appear on the daily dashboard. And as far as I understand it, there's nothing to guarantee that if somebody tests positive, that would then be articulated to the Ministry of Health. Are you concerned about this, especially as we approach the winter months? There's seemingly increased reliance on the antigen test, and I think there's some concern that we may not get as clear a picture as we could about the COVID-19 situation.
Okay, I would like to clarify that because there's some inconsistencies in those comments. First of all, I would like to let the Bahamian people know that it is mandatory to report rapid antigen tests as well as PCR tests. And so every lab or testing facility through the country have been instructed to report their findings so that it could be incorporated in our database so that we can get a true indication of where we are with COVID. I assure you that the two pieces of regulations that will be tabled in the House of Assembly on the way forward in managing the pandemic addresses the absolute essential criteria for labs to report what's going on. And if you do not report, you are subjected to penalties. But you are right. A rapid antigen test versus a PCR test are two different testing modalities. And with the rapid antigen tests, with our free testing, we are now in the final stages of developing those medical algorithms necessary to ensure that the validity of a positive versus a negative is absolutely essential in order for it to be going into our database so that our database could be in real time reflecting what's going on with COVID throughout the country.
Okay, well, I'll give you one more. We have to go to this level.
Just very briefly, the budget for the Ministry of Health had a reduction. I think it's about $14 million. The basis, or the majority of that, is a $10 million allocation for contingencies for COVID-19. I'm just curious where that went, or if there's no need for that allocation anymore.
Well, you know, our budgetary allocations, we are now discussing them with the Ministry of Finance. I assure you, the Ministry of Finance would not take away essential resources for the Ministry of Health. But I want to point you towards two IDB loans that exist. There's two IDB loans, one for medical infrastructure, which is around $40 million, and the other one is for COVID management, which is around $20 million. That particular money, I cannot give you exactly where it is, but I assure you that the Ministry of Health will not be taking monies that are necessary to fight COVID away from the Ministry of Health budget. But there is an allocation in the budget which revolves around a $19 million subvention that was associated with the 4-story block at Durand Memorial Hospital. And the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Finance, we will be going into greater details of what that means when we start the debate for the supplementary budget.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Darville. Our time, so I'm going to quickly, because I promised you last week, I'll quickly give you some announcements with the boards, and then we'll wrap up because we're at the hour. I promised last week that we were going to have some board announcements for you. We do. Cabinet is still working on that. Cabinet is expected to meet again tomorrow afternoon to deal with board appointments, and they're expecting to wrap up the board. So you can imagine it is a very detailed process, 140 boards. And so they're hoping to wrap up. If you notice, Cabinet has been meeting a lot, and that's because they're trying to wrap up boards. But what they are trying to do is get the critical boards that need to have their chairman or chairpersons in office. They've been trying to do that quickly. We can make some of those announcements for you. Again, it reflects the deepening of what the Davis administration is about, a well-rounded list of people of all ages, sectors, capability, and skills. So let's begin with some of the announcements of chairpersons that we can make for some of the corporations. The Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, the chairperson will be Ms. Barbara Cartwright. Bahamas Power and Light Chairman, Mr. Pedro Roll. Chairman for Bahamas Air, Mr. Anthony Kiki Varacas. Bahamas Air Navigation Services Authority, Ms. Wendy Craig. Civil Aviation Authority Chairman, Mr. Devad Francis. Gaming Board Chairman, Dr. Daniel Johnson. Chairman of the Hotel Corporation of the Bahamas, Senator the Honorable James Turner. Chairman Hotel Licensing Board Chairman, Mr. Roderick Colbrook. Chairman of the Nassau Flight Services, Senator the Honorable Ronald Duncombe. Chairman of the National Insurance Board, Mr. Philip McKinsey. Chairman of the Port Authority, Mr. Tavares LaRoda. Executive Chairman of the Public Beaches and Parks Authority, MP Mr. Mikkel Bonnaby. Chairman of the Public Hospitals Authority, Mr. Andrew Edwards. Chairman of Water and Sewage Corporation, Mr. Sylvanus Petty, the Member of Parliament for North Eleuthera. Executive Chairman of the Bahamas Agricultural Industrial Corporation, Mr. Leroy Major, MP. Chairman Airport Authority, Paul Bevins. Chairman of Lucayan Holdings Limited, Julian Russell. Bahamas Development Bank, Quinton Lightburn. BAMSI, Mr. Terrell Young. Okay, so those are the ones that we have available to you now, and we expect Cabinet to meet to wrap up this process on Friday. We are now at our point, so we can't take it. I'll take one question, just out of good faith. Good, everybody looked at me like, we don't have a question. Okay.
Certainly. So when can we expect this BPL report to be released to the public?
Sure. The Attorney General is reviewing the report now, and upon his completion, he'll make the advice as to whether we can release it, and I'm sure that will happen. But he's now reviewing it. It's in his hands.
To come of it.
Not until he reviews it, and he'll make it his advice as to what should happen, whether there's any course of action. He will talk more about this, but we can tell you there are some concerns about the report and the validity of it. But he's reviewing it now, and then once he's done, we don't want to speak to it because, of course, they're still in the middle of litigation in this matter. So once he's reviewed it, he will advise further on where to go with it. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, thank you. It's a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you at our next press conference, and thank you for your time and your partnership. We continue to work together, and we want the Bahamian people to know that the Davis administration is working in their best interest, and every decision that we make, we're thinking about them and what's best at the end of the day for the Bahamian people. We act on their behalf. Thank you, colleagues. Have a great afternoon.